Consider this. On a serene afternoon in California's Laurel Canyon, memories endure as sunshine filters through the eucalyptus trees. The ghosts of Joni Mitchell's loved ones, co-workers, and rival from the 1970s are all around her. After decades of silence, she finally opens the vault of her heart and recounts the 7 men who transformed her life forever. They are masters of chaos, beauty, and sadness in addition to being artists. Her greatest songs were inspired by these individuals, who also caused her the most pain. The beauty of her voice conceals the hurt of their betrayals, and their faces are intertwined into the fabric of her songs. She doesn't reveal the truth about them today, since she's upset. The first person to truly see Joni's soul and quietly leave it was Leonard Cohen. In 1967, they met on the Greek island of Hydra. Two artists are engrossed in the same fever dream and painting. Their connection was instantaneous and doomed from the beginning. Cohen was difficult to locate, but he was kind. He wrote her poems in the morning and left in the evening. His passion for women resembled a lovely, brief, and incomplete poem. He was calm, but Joni, who was honest and gentle, felt she could hold him. However, he was somewhat aloof. They experienced both joy and sorrow during their time together. The bright lanes of Hydra, which became both a paradise and a battlefield, were filled with the sound of their battles and laughing. She would be healed by love. He desired love that fulfilled him. When he did go, it was in a hushed quietness rather than with rage. Joni's suffering became music. Songs that would haunt people for generations were born out of her broken heart. Cohen was still the poet who was unable to stay, and she was the one who created enduring art out of pain. Joni believed she would spend the rest of her life with Nash. They could laugh, play music, and discuss their ambitions in the safety of their Laurel Canyon home. She was adored by Nash. In the midst of pandemonium, she provided him with inspiration and serenity. For a while, they were the ideal couple in the canyon, but as the harmony between Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young swords dissolved, feminine evil began to infiltrate. Joni desired tranquility. Graham was looking forward to the rush of triumph. Silence took the place of songs, and space took the place of love. When their world finally fell apart, it did so with sadness rather than rage. Blue, her masterpiece that was a farewell to Graham and the notion that love could last through celebrity, was born out of that anguish. For years, Nash harbored resentment for her and always referred to her with deference. Joni received a more severe lesson. Even good souls might fail when desire arises. Their brief but lovely relationship left scars that eventually became songs. All right, you got stuck. I was immediately apprehended because of this. This required me to create a smokescreen. There was no interest in the music. I was deceived by fate as I was unaware of my gift. I hadn't started writing yet. James Taylor was young, attractive, and frail when Joni first met him. He bore both brightness and shadow, a survivor. Due to late-night compositions and covert whispers, they clicked right away and their sounds blended flawlessly. Together, they wrote songs that, while they did not cure themselves, helped others. Swiftly, Taylor's anxieties surfaced. His depression and drug addiction pulled him into the shadowy areas Joni was unable to access. She converted her suffering into a river, wrote, and waited. His absence is as frigid as that tune. Once a pair, their love is now just the two of them and the stillness. When it was finished, there were no screaming. They simply understood that they couldn't save one another. Taylor would refer to her as the escapee after many years, but the harm was already done. Their tale changed from one of beauty to one of sadness. Pain tore apart two hearts that were united by music. Jackson Browne entered Joni's life in a swift, forceful, and perilous manner. Bright Folk with a Deeper Beat was the new sound of Los Angeles, and he had it. At first, two musicians were enamored with one another and lost themselves in each other's music, but their devotion quickly devolved into mayhem. Joni desired tranquility. However, because to Browne's ambition and jealousy, arguments erupted like wildfire. He felt even less secure as his notoriety increased. Like the men Joni had once loved, the men she saw were caught between intelligence and authority. She was now afraid of what formerly inspired her. There was stillness the previous time they split up, the burden of exhaustion between them. She had been mistreated behind closed doors, as later controversies would show. Joni, however, did not shatter. She made music out of her suffering, evidence that broken things may be beautiful. Joni looked to David Crosby for guidance and heartache before her notoriety made people frightened to touch her. She was a rising star, and he was a sinking star when they first met in 1967. He believed she was intelligent, helped her compose a song for a bird, and filled her life with both chaos and music. Joni found him intriguing and appealing. He considered her to be an inspiration who rekindled his long-lost passion. Crosby's troubles were never far away while he was away. Because of his addiction to excess and ego, he confused control with love. Joni's wish for calm was thwarted by his parties, his ladies, and his negative attitude. The more famous she became, the less proud he was. Love became a combustible feeling, and envy became appreciation. They quietly ended their relationship due to addiction and guilt. However, the relationship persisted. Years later, he claimed that losing her was one of his worst pains. For Joni, it was a harsh reality. Genius and security don't usually coexist. Furthermore, the cost of love from a tormented spirit is always higher than the benefit. Not all of the men Joni slept with were artists. Hollywood's golden playboy, Warren Beatty, swept into her life like a diamond storm. He was the epitome of charm at the moment. She is dangerously self-assured and quite humorous. Like a comet surrounded by admirers, he moved from party to party. As if it were insignificant, he inhaled attention. Joni had worked with musicians and authors for years. Therefore, she found Beatty's movie world to be both intriguing and peculiar. They first met during a dinner with well-known businesspeople in Los Angeles. Her mystery immediately captured Beatty's attention. The peaceful folk singer who had not been influenced by the excesses of Hollywood and walked like a queen. They had an electric bond, although it was short-lived. Beatty pursued her with the same intensity that he applied to all the other girls he had feelings for. He promised to show her a world she had never seen, and he contacted her late at night and sent her flowers. But beneath all the glitter, Joni sensed nothingness. A man who was more interested in chasing than in love. Their brief time together resembled a scene from one of his films. The sound of adjacent cameras was accompanied by flirtation and laughs. Joni was aware of his deceit, though. A restless ego and a yearning for approval that no single woman could satisfy lay behind the attractiveness. The performer who could enthrall any audience was unable to hold the interest of a woman who could see right through his deceptions. Joan's quest for emotional depth and the truth contrasted sharply with Beatty's glamorous and shallow world. She wanted people to be truthful. He was a big fan of shows. When she realized that his love was an act, she departed before the script could unfold once more. It was hardly an exciting parting. It was practically silent because they both understood they were from different worlds. It demonstrated to Joni that the most intriguing star guys were frequently the most uninteresting. Over the following few decades, Warren would continue to both fascinate and damage a lot of women. Diane Keaton, Julie Christie, and Natalie Wood. However, Joni's brief encounter with him revealed her transformation. She no longer cared about being loved by dangerous men. She began to realize that fake love was just another way to feel alone. Beatty remained the most alluring embodiment of Hollywood's emptiness. Joni, on the other hand, focused more on her craft and used her disappointment to create songs that expressed harsh realities about self-worth, power, and love. Bob Dylan was possibly the most enigmatic and complex of all the men she was close to. They were much more than just lovers. It was the collision of two disparate artistic realms. It was in the late 1960s that Joni first met Dylan. She was already a famous folk poet. There was a mixture of suspicion and respect between them, even though he referred to himself as the prophet of an age. Joni was able to see through his deception and sense the cunning manipulation concealed beneath his enigmatic smile. She was honest and refused to worship his popularity, which is why Dylan was afraid of her. They didn't often get together, but when they did, it was special. They used cutting, humorous language while they were backstage, after performances, or at parties in Laurel Canyon. At one point, Joni compared him to an unsolvable problem. He had a compelling, yet icy demeanor. Dylan's charm drew women in and led them to believe he was serious, but this was untrue. Joni perceived in him the attractiveness of a guy who believed emotions were merely instruments rather than realities. When she began singing the same words as him and receiving the same accolades from critics that he used to consistently receive, their rivalry intensified. The heated situation was demonstrated by little public actions. When Dylan informed a gathering of individuals in the early 1970s that Joni's songs were too intimate, Joni responded with a smile more pointed than words. She later vented her rage in songs about men wearing intelligence masks, such as Talk to Me and Coyote. Everything Dylan disliked about the male-dominated music industry, such as how brilliance might mask brutality and how celebrity could conceal quiet, was reflected in her lack of interest in people. The two had a peculiar mutual regard in private. Even when she battled him, Dylan admired her bravery. Later, when they were both older and more exhausted, they would cross paths once more. Their rivalry evolved into mutual understanding. However, they fought a Cold War in the 1970s using pride in art. He alternated between tunes and ladies. Moody, out of reach, and untouchable. She converted their altercation into art that would endure longer than the rumors because she refused to succumb to his cruel actions. In the end, Bob Dylan became more than a rival. He represented all the men who didn't think highly of her and all the victories she claimed in exchange. Teton. When Joni Mitchell finally discussed these guys, not for rumors but for news, the entire globe paid attention. They were the gods of her time, the ones who both uplifted and wounded her. Like a spark, each of them entered her life and ruined it. Nevertheless, beauty emerged from every damaged heart. Joni turned love into a fight with her celebrity, ego, and drug usage, and she wrote about it as a poet and soldier. She describes in her essays how each man had an impact on her spirit. She learned from Leonard Cohen that loneliness results from having intelligence without regard for others. She learned the price of loving someone with lofty goals when you want to achieve success from Graham Nash. James Taylor demonstrated the frailty of forgiveness. Anger can spiral out of control, as demonstrated by Jackson Browne. David Crosby demonstrated the dangers of taking things too far. Warren Beatty also demonstrated the hollowness of celebrity. Even the most intelligent people can be harmed by silence, according to Bob Dylan, her longtime competitor. Joni no longer viewed her life as a string of failed relationships by the late 1970s. Rather, she viewed it as a live document of a period that offered heartache along with the promise of freedom. Despite being a period of liberation, the 1970s caused harm to a lot of women. Those years were both good and difficult for Joni. Every song she created reflected the betrayals, laughs, and lingering shadows of these guys. She turned every loss into a poem and every grief into a lesson. When she considers what has transpired, she doesn't sound upset. She speaks clearly. Her heart was broken by the guys who slept with other women in the 1970s, but they also gave her courage. They helped her realize how blurry the boundaries are between devastation and love, between art and death. Joni Mitchell returned stronger than when they left. Long after they are gone, her music will endure.